Okay, this is actually my second video. The first one didn't come out so well, and just as a simple plug, let's check out that picture my brother took of me on my Stratoliner. Heck yeah! Anyway, this video is to help you with this saddlebag lock and key situation. I had the same problem. I had a saddlebag lock that broke, and I went ahead and ordered a new replacement kit. And I got a good deal on this thing here. The part number is right there, the Yamaha part number. I ended up ordering this thing on eBay, pretty cheap, wasn't that bad. But the kit came with two of the newer style saddlebag locks and a windshield lock and two keys and a small little identification key tag, which is something you give your locksmith if you had a problem. So if you end up replacing the windshield lock and the two saddlebag locks, you'll have one key for your ignition and one key for your seat release. Then you'll have a second key for your two saddlebags and your windshield lock. And I really didn't want to deal with that. Back in the day, years and years ago, I used to actually rekey locks for Lowe's Hardware when I was a young, strapping lad. So it's not that difficult. And whenever I got the new replacement lock, everybody said that you could not rekey the thing, and I knew that was actually wrong. There's not really any locks you can't rekey. So anyway, I'm gonna try to do this better than I did my first video. I didn't like it. The biggest difference in the new lock versus the old lock, which I don't have an old lock here. The new one is more metal, it's stronger, and the button itself, the actual button, is retained by a screw. In the old lock, it's actually retained by this little teeny tiny retention tab here, which you can see is just, you've seen them before. So anyway, when my lock would not open, you would mash the button all day long, and it wouldn't retract this catch. So what I ended up doing, I was like, well, I'm just going to end up destroying the lock and hoping for the best. I didn't want to destroy the rack bag. So I grabbed this original button, which is plastic. The new one is metal. And I just grabbed a pair of pliers and it plucked right off. I was like, well, that ain't very strong. And I realized how kind of weak the system is. The newer one is a lot better designed. When I took this apart, I was left with basically just the lock body and the guts, and I saw what the problem was. There's a stick basically in there. Let me find myself an example. This retention tab is got a ramp in it, and when you hit the button, this goes down and pushes this thing back in basically. And that retention tab broke. And I'm going to take this one apart and show you. And so whenever I took the button off and I could see the guts of the actual locking mechanism, there's two parts. You have a tumbler and a locking mechanism. Once I saw the broken pieces, I just gutted it down. I could see down inside, I could see this thing. And I popped the spring out and I used a long screwdriver, and I was able to push this back and get my saddlebag open. And once it was open, I could take the screws out here of the body and I could just get rid of the old lock. So that takes me to this video, which is the point of trying to help you out here. I took the tumbler, which was not broke, which typically does not break, and I wanted to take the tumbler guts and put it in the new button. And that's, I'm sure, what you want to do. Most locks, you need the key to take the tumbler out, to mash the tumblers flat. But this is one of them old cheap styles that's got the flat tumblers, not the round pin ones. So all you have is you have a tumbler per key. The notches in the key, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of them, I guess. And you have another one on the end that's actually just your retainer. And I'm going to try to see if we can see this thing. It's probably too bright. Maybe too bright. You'll see a little copper thing down there towards the bottom. You have the aluminum body of the tumbler itself and the plastic housing. There's what looks like a little piece of copper in there. That is the retaining tumbler. And all you have to do is you take a small screwdriver and you just take that last retention tumbler, mash it up in there, and push the tumbler out with your finger, and there you are. You'll do the same thing with the new one. The only difference is with the old button you could pluck out with a pair of pliers because it's just retained by that plastic wedge there. The new one is retained by a screw, and the button is physically longer. So once you take this screw out, take the button out, you'll take the new key, and you don't need the new key. You'll take the same idea, you'll take the screwdriver, and what you're doing is you're mashing in this last tumbler. It's hard to tell maybe, but these tumblers here are the tumblers for the key code. And whenever you put the key in, all those tumblers are now flush, which allows it to turn, but this one still stands up. Now with the key in, what you have to understand is this last piece right here actually prevents this from getting mashed in. See, I can actually mash this tumbler all the way in flush, but when the key is in there I can only push it in about halfway. So the key actually keeps this tumbler from collapsing all the way, which prevents it from coming out. So do not use the key. All you have to do is take a screwdriver and reach up in here and mash this tumbler flat, and then push the whole thing out with your finger. Now to get it back together, if you look inside you'll see highs and low spots, okay? On the old one it doesn't really matter because you can pop it in either way. The new one you have to make sure that it matches up with the screw line, which you can't mess it up, and I'll show you that later. It has to do with this little detent keyway on the back. I'll take the new lock apart, you'll understand. You'll see this little detent here in the shape of this. That's what engages the locking mechanism that actually breaks. So anyway, once you take the old one apart, just like you took this one apart, you'll take your old tumbler that matches your original key, and you will line it up inside here with the hit one of the low spots, you know, one of these, not the valley but the ridge. And all you got to do is take this key and go in kind of an angle. So what you want to do is you want to mash this up flat. So mash it up in there flat, and then the whole key goes in, and you ends up retaining it in the back. You might have to turn it. You have to play with it a little bit. There we go. And the retention tab pops up, holds it in the housing, and now just like originally, you have a 90-degree turning key. Okay? But you're going to put this back in this lock. Now that's how you switch the tumblers. Now let me go to show you what the failure is on these locks. And I understand this new one's a little bit different. So I'm going to hold the button down just a little bit, and I'm going to take this screw out. And that holds the tumbler into the lock. The easiest thing apart. And you'll see the biggest difference with the new one, which is metal, versus the old one, which is plastic. You see the length difference. The new lock will stick up out of the rack bag a little higher than the original one, so expect that. But as you can see, the guts is real shallow in this one, right near the edge. This one is actually down in there further. That's because they've incorporated the retention portion of this button differently. Again, the old one is just retained by this little tab of plastic, which is a joke, and the old one's at least held in by a small screw that fits in this slot in the body of it. This is the actual part that breaks, this little stem right here. And that's what cracks, and that's what doesn't let you open your rack bag. Alright, so that's all of the guts out of the interior of the lock body. And the way this thing works basically is you have a spring that pushes the latch out. This is the latch that you'll obviously recognize. But when you mash the button in, this thing pushes it back. There's a ramp inside, and then of course when you let off the button, the spring, the big spring, pushes this back up, and the little spring pushes this thing back sideways, allowing it to latch. That's how this works. Okay. Inside the housing, you'll see a keyway down in there, and that has to match this thing. Now, whenever it is lined up, this will push in, allowing this to be retracted back. But when you turn the key, all it does is it turns this, where this keyway right here at the top, or the side I guess you could say, doesn't line up with the keyhole down there, and that's what actually causes it to lock. So, not the securest things in the world. But anyway, so once you take your new lock apart, you have two springs, a big and a small. You have the latch. You have this one's metal. It's nice and it's stronger than the original. And of course the housing. And you have your two buttons. And I've already showed you how to switch your tumblers out. So you'll put the old guts in the new tumbler. And you can go ahead and take your new guts, which is what this is actually, and put it in your old housing and just set it aside in case you ever need it. So when you go to put your housing back together, what it boils down to is you have the small spring. It fits in this little detent on the back, right there. It doesn't really want to hang on to it, but anyway, that's where it goes. That goes into the side of the housing, just like this. Okay, that little spring is what causes this thing to come out. All right, so hold that in. Now you've got to line up your pin, which goes in the center, but you also got to make sure the keyway is situated correctly, and that, well, in this case, a 12 o'clock position. Now, going back to something, let's pause real quick. You actually can see the inside of this thing. I hope you can. There's a small little detent right there at the top, and that's what has to match the back side of the lock tumbler and the detent. So you just have to kind of look at it. It makes total sense once you get it apart in your hand, because it can only really go together one way. All right, so let's go back to this thing. You have your keyway down there, and that means it's got to go in with this detent on the up 12 o'clock position, the way I've got it in my hand. So put your big spring on it, and you've got to feed it in there, keeping the spring in place, and you got to line that hole up, make sure it goes in. All right. So now that I got it in there, I can actually, hang on, I'm turning it till it falls in place. I goofed it up. Start over. And put the spring, get that in here, mash that tab in, get the lock and that thing, and it's, I don't have them little teeny tiny Asian hands, so here we go. All right, so I got it in there, and as you can see, that's how it works. I push my thumb in there, so it's correctly oriented, and so make sure you don't come apart so it doesn't not line up. And once you have that, take your new lock. You know, like I said, you have that little detent that I'm telling you about is at the 12 o'clock position. You got to make sure that it's also in the 12 o'clock position on your tumbler, and the screw hole lines up with the window. Otherwise, you put your tumbler in there, take your tumbler back out like I showed you earlier, and flip it 180 degrees. Oh, you gotta be kidding me. Piece of junk. All right, let's try it again. Yeah, it's not that difficult. It's just the fact you got to hold like 2 spring pressures and get everything lined up and get this button in there with the screw hole in a correct location so it lines up with that thing. It's just, that's all there is to it. It's not a big pain, it's just a slight pain. Anyway, so once you get it back together, you'll take hold it all together. You'll hold the thing in the back. You'll hold the button about halfway down, and you'll see the screw hole. And you'll take that small screw, and you'll put it back in there. And by the way, the piece shot out again. I didn't want to make this a long-winded video to bore you, but I was trying to get it back together. There we go. All right, so now I've got it back together correctly. Well, you can see the button retracts the thing. It actually might be better to put the tumbler in before you put this piece in. That might actually be a whole lot easier. The more you mess with stuff, I guess the easier it becomes when you learn the tricks. Take your screw and run it back inside. And maybe a dab of Loctite wouldn't hurt. And so as you can see, the screw retains it in that little detent window, and now everything's back together, and you've done all that just so you can replace that tumbler. It's not that hard. I'm sorry I kind of goofed it up, but once you take it apart, it makes total sense. But I want to go back, recap something. Again, to take it apart, you don't need the key in there. You just have to take a small screwdriver and work that little retaining thing up. You can see it's spring loaded. Just kind of scoop under it, mash it flat, take your finger, and push the tumbler out. And to put her back in, it goes in. Just make sure you mash that retention tumbler flat and give her a push on through, and she'll lock right on in there. And that's all you gotta kind of do. You really can't mess it up. It's just kind of got to play with it. That's all there's to it. I hope this helps. If you have any questions, feel free to shoot me a message or instant message or whatever. And if anybody on the forum wants to take this video and post it up to maybe help other people, feel free. And again, just send me any messages if you have a question. Appreciate it.